He was an unmistakably unique presence in the art world, a black artist with a distinct style and voice, working in a predominantly white environment. Being a famous artist in the 1980s was fast-paced and demanding. For the young painter, fame and fortune came quickly, and his brief career was met with a tragic ending. Jean-Michel Basquiat was born on December 22, 1960, in Park Slope, Brooklyn, New York. He was the second of 4 children, having one older brother, Max, who died before he was born, and 2 younger sisters, Lisanne and Janine. Their father, Gerard, was Haitian American and worked as an accountant. Their mother, Matilda, was Puerto Rican and would give Jean-Michel an early appreciation of the arts by taking him to museums. Basquiat was a smart child, learning to read and write by the age of 4, and fluent in English, Spanish, and French by the time he was a teenager.
Je suis la jeune fille.
When he was 7 years old, he was hit by a car while playing in the street, resulting in the removal of his spleen. While in the hospital, his mother brought him a copy of the book Gray's Anatomy to keep him occupied. Anatomy would be a common theme in his work. When he was 13, his mother was admitted to a mental institution, spending the rest of her life in and out of institutions. His family life was unstable, and he ran away from home when he was 15, spending several months living on the streets of New York. Here, he would also begin using drugs. Eventually, he was returned home to his father, and at age 17, he was enrolled at the alternative high school, Cidiez School, in Manhattan, where he met his friend Al Diaz. Together, they developed the concept of Samo, an inside joke that came from the phrase, same old shit. Samo was an art experiment, a series of cryptic messages tagged on the walls throughout the Soho neighborhood of Manhattan. Towards the end of the 1970s, New York was transitioning from a dirty, crime-infested hole to the family-friendly destination we know today. It was during this period that Basquiat dropped out of high school. He moved to Lower Manhattan in 1978, staying with various friends. He often hung out at the School of Visual Arts, where he met artists Keith Haring, John Sex, and Kenny Scharf. Another frequent hangout spot was the Mud Club, a nightclub that opened the same year. The Samo works gained attention in the art community, and the Village Voice, an alternative culture newspaper, picked up the story about Samo, revealing and highlighting the artists behind the works. Soon after, Basquiat and Al Diaz had a falling out, resulting in the end of the Samo works. Interest in the Samo works continued as Glenn O'Brien, host of the public access show TV Party, did an interview with Basquiat.
Tonight we're lucky enough to have with us probably the most language-oriented of all graffiti artists in New York, Samo, and his associate. Samo, sorry.
It's Mr. Samo. It's my personal secretary.
Sorry, Mr. Samo.
Leading to regular appearances on the show. In April 1979, the Canal Zone Party was held as a collaboration of artists in the emerging hip-hop culture. Here, Basquiat met Michael Holman, who was one of the organizers of the party. The two would start an experimental band together, called Test Pattern, later renamed Gray, a reference to Gray's Anatomy.
Choose me. Love me.
Another artist that Basquiat met at the Canal Zone Party was Jennifer Stein, who was working on customized baseball cards. From that, Basquiat had the idea of creating postcards that the two would sell on the streets. On one occasion, selling his postcards, Basquiat spotted Andy Warhol at a restaurant. Eventually, he worked up the courage to talk to him and sold him a couple of postcards. An article by Glenn O'Brien titled Graffiti 80: The State of Outlaw Art appeared in High Times in June of 1980, which featured Basquiat. After that, he appeared in O'Brien's film, New York Beat, which is about a struggling artist in New York. Props that were created for this movie are some of Basquiat's earliest paintings, and the first painting that he sold was Cadillac Moon, sold for $200 to Debbie Harry, lead singer of the band Blondie. Harry was also in New York Beat, and made appearances on TV Party. Basquiat appeared as a DJ in the 1981 music video for Blondie's Rapture.
Rapture.
The first time Basquiat was part of an art show was at the Times Square show in 1980. Some early works were done on doors, windows, and objects found on the street. His painting career didn't truly begin, though, until an invite came from Diego Cortez, owner of the Mud Club, for his 1981 art show, New York New Wave. The show was not reviewed well by critics. However, most critics agreed that the work by newcomer Basquiat was the highlight of the show. Much of his early imagery offers reminders of his time on the streets: cars, planes, buildings, and graffiti. Several top art gallerists in attendance also took notice, including Emilio Mazzoli, who gave Basquiat his first solo exhibition in Italy soon after. A second exhibition was planned for the following year, but never took place. 8 paintings were created for this event, which clearly mark Basquiat's transition from street artist to professional painter. Elements of abstract expressionism can be seen in these works. Another gallerist in New York, Anina Nozay, would provide him with art supplies and give him studio space to work in the basement of her art gallery. She also invited him to participate in her group exhibition, Public Address. His work sold quickly at the show, and Nozay became his main gallerist. Many paintings were being sold before they were even finished. Shortly after this, an article in Art Forum titled "The Radiant Child" brought him international attention. His first US solo show was held in Nozay's gallery in 1982 and was a huge success, followed by a show in LA. He also became the youngest artist ever to take part in Documenta, a contemporary art exhibition that takes place every 5 years in Germany. After another show in Switzerland at Bruno Bischofberger's gallery, Bischofberger would become his art dealer in Europe. He would also set up a lunch where Basquiat would meet Andy Warhol. Following this meeting, Basquiat went home, painted Dos Cabezas, and returned to Warhol, all within 2 hours after the meeting. A friendship developed between the two that would last for several years. Another important showing was at the Fun Gallery later that year. Among the paintings exhibited was a panel of experts, which features the names Venus and Madonna, a reference to 2 women that Basquiat had dated. By this time, Basquiat's painting style had evolved. Words and phrases are often used throughout his works, many taken from his surroundings. He incorporated references to anything from current events to ancient mythology, with his words interacting with and balancing out the canvas.
Where did the words come from?
Real life books, television.
Yeah, and you just skim them and start including...
No, I mean, when I'm working, I hear them, and I just throw them down.
He often uses a black protagonist in his paintings to give his work narrative. He was very aware of being a black artist living in a traditionally white European art world, a fact that was reinforced during his time working in the basement of Anina Nozay's gallery. He incorporated many famous African American figures into his work. Athletes like Joe Louis, Sugar Ray Robinson, and Cassius Clay, as well as legendary jazz musicians such as Charlie Parker and Miles Davis, among others. Symbols are another constant presence in his work, like his iconic 3-pointed crown and copyright symbols. Skulls, bones, and anatomy drawings are another common element. Certain words appear on multiple paintings, like asbestos, which is a reference to the ongoing litigation in the 1980s, and the corporate greed behind it.
In the future, I would prefer a nondescript briefcase to the sack with a $sign on it.
In 1983, he produced the hip-hop album Beat Bop, which he also created the cover art for. The same year, he became one of the youngest artists to participate in the Whitney Biennial Exhibition of Contemporary Art. In September of 1983, an aspiring black artist named Michael Stewart was killed by police after spraying graffiti in a Manhattan subway. Basquiat had known Stewart personally, and following his death, he painted Defacement in response. His next exhibition took him to Tokyo, and following this show, Bruno Bischofberger would be his worldwide art dealer. Basquiat continued to have shows around the world, and by the mid-1980s, he was making over $1 million a year from the sales of his paintings. The increased income led to increased drug use, as well as emotional instability. In 1984, he joined Mary Boone's gallery in New York. She quickly organized a solo show for him, and for the first time, reviews were mixed. Critics felt that he was self-conscious with his latest work, and not as bold as before. He was also doing collaborations with Francesco Clemente and Andy Warhol around this time. Clemente was eventually left out of the collaborations, and the following year an exhibition opened that highlighted the Warhol and Basquiat collaborations. Art critics panned these works with harsh reviews and even insulting comments that would have a huge impact on Basquiat. The relationship was strained between the two artists after this, and the collaborations ended. The same year, Basquiat was featured on the cover of the New York Times wearing a paint-splattered Armani suit and in bare feet. Basquiat had met Jennifer Good at Area nightclub where he frequented, and the two dated for 2 years. In 1986, Good checked herself and Basquiat into a methadone program in Manhattan to try and get away from drugs. The two later ended their relationship after Basquiat failed to show up. Following this, Andy Warhol passed away in 1987, and Basquiat became increasingly isolated. Paintings from around this time are more complex than ever, with stronger colors and more layering, and indicate that Basquiat was experimenting with his work. Friends of his say that he had even considered changing career paths to work in film or writing. Following more exhibits in 1988, he traveled to Maui, Hawaii to take another shot at rehab. He returned to New York in June of 1988 with plans to stay sober. Fellow artist Keith Haring ran into Basquiat after this, recalling, "He told me he had kicked, which is the first time he had even acknowledged a habit at all. He seemed honestly excited." Jean-Michel Basquiat died on August 12, 1988, at the age of 27 from a drug overdose. A funeral was held for family and close friends, including Keith Haring, Francesco Clemente, and Glenn O'Brien. Haring would create a painting in memoriam titled "A Pile of Crowns for Jean-Michel Basquiat." Although up for debate, many believe that Writing with Death was Basquiat's final painting. Created months before his death, it's possible that the painting is an acknowledgement of his own mortality. Although Basquiat's career only lasted 8 years, he produced more than 600 paintings, and his impact on the art world is still felt today. In 2017, a Japanese collector paid $110 million for his painting Untitled at a Sotheby's auction, which at the time was the highest amount paid for any work by an American artist. Rapper Jay-Z, in addition to being one of many artists that have referenced Basquiat in their music, posed in front of the painting Equals Pie in 2021, along with wife Beyonce, for a Tiffany commercial. And big brands continue to use his work and symbols on merchandise today. So, what do you think about the work of Basquiat? Does his work stand out among other artists? And where do you think his work would have gone had his life not ended so soon? Any thoughts you have on this artist, please let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please support this channel by liking and subscribing.